Over the years, my desire for jaunts had begun to cool as I saw more bullets and landmines. There was never any treasure at the end of it all, except for the knowledge contained within this book. Fascinating and valuable it was, to be sure. I'd begun to understand some important facts about life and politics and human beings. But the character of those facts made me gloomy. I was tired of getting shot at, of being stupid, of having nightmares about Hitler and his analogs. If I stopped jaunting, I would get bored. And if I kept it up, I would get killed. So I believed. And this book was getting longer and longer. By the time I set out in earnest to find Pol Pot, I still wanted to meet and know and refuse to hate the others. But I did not really want to be a journalist anymore. Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today, I'm talking about Volume 5 of William T. Vollmann's unabridged 7-volume masterwork, Rising Up and Rising Down. It's, of course, his meditation on violence and when it is and is not justified. Volume 5 takes us into the section of this long essay called Studies in Consequences. And this volume specifically covers Southeast Asia, Europe, and Africa. Now that we've left justifications behind and we've established William T. Vollmann's moral calculus, we're now looking at basically his journalism that fed into this long work and pretty much all of his fiction. So this is much more journalistic. It gets away from the critical thinking and analysis of all the volumes we've read so far. In that regard, it reads a lot faster. You could think of it as the reward at the end of combing through and journeying through the volumes that precede it, if you're doing like me and reading each volume sequentially. Throughout the essay so far, there have been moments where he has said something along the lines of, if you want to see kind of where this thought comes from, then see the essay entitled blah, blah, blah. Well, those essays are now what we're reading in these two justification volumes, which are the last two volumes in the series, referred to as volumes 5 and 6. The book that makes it a 7-volume set, again, is the moral calculus that precedes all the other volumes, or kind of accompanies it. It's sort of your navigational beacon around the entire essay. Because this is an accumulation of his journalism, or basically the immersion, the firsthand experiences in all these different places in the world that led into creating this whole Rising Up and Rising Down project. It is, again, it's much more journalistic, it's more narrative, but just as that opening quote I read intimates, Vollmann is starting to get a little bit disillusioned with what exactly he's doing and the real value of journalism. It comes out again toward the end of the book, or of this volume, in the final essay called Special Tax. And this is about the two Congos that resulted from Zaire, so the Republic of Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But he says, some years ago, I sold my soul to the magazines. The price I got was excellent, money enough to buy whatever I wanted. My wants, perhaps, are small. Adventures in exotic countries, and more liberty of expression and behavior than my friends get accorded. In exchange, I laid down my illusions about painting the big picture, not to mention making a difference. They used to allow me 20,000 words. Then it was 10. Now, if I'm lucky, it's 5 to 7, a phrase which sounds like a prison sentence, but which actually means less work for me. I never complain unless they change yes to no, misspell my name, or, God forbid, fail to pay on time. So, of course, you get his sardonic humor as always, but you can see that he's getting jaded. Two things will come to mind when you read through all these different intrepid tales of Vollmann with boots on the ground. One, you will constantly question, how is William T. Vollmann not dead yet? How has he not been killed? And the second one is, how is he just not completely jaded to the point where he can't write about this stuff anymore? If one thing can be said about William T. Vollmann is that he never has writer's block and never has a problem writing. He seems to be in love with the act of writing anything, just in and of itself, the action of writing. It's like he can't stop. And I'm thankful for that because he is an incredible writer. In fact, this passage I found exemplary of why I keep coming back to William T. Vollmann. The sky flickered white and black, then suddenly red from a distant shell. Mika moaned in her sleep. I had taken the bulletproof vest off because I could not bear to lie next to them with more protection than they had. But all that meant was that I kept waking up wondering when a shell or a bullet would discover me. This fear was, like most fears, founded on inexact statistical analysis. Had I known that in World War I, for instance, it required an average of 5,000 bullets to wound or kill a single soul, I might have slept better, although in Sarajevo, they probably harmed people more efficiently since so many of them were non-combatants. At any rate, I did sleep better every night, because after all, I was there, and my fear could not do me any good. So it was better to be influenced by fallacies of safety than by chimeras of extinction. I think this passage that I just read is exemplary because it shows how Vollmann can so crisply set a scene. It shows his concern for others. It drops an interesting factoid. It has his sardonic sort of gallows humor. He embraces his humanness, his mortality. There's a balance of emotion and reason that's very hard to achieve in such situations and in such writing. And just the strong rhetorical skill. He decided to embrace fallacies of safety instead of chimeras of extinction. It's beautiful. In this volume, we get the extended tale of Vollmann smuggling a Thai child prostitute to safety. Come to find out, the child ended up a prostitute because of her father and her uncle, which is just deplorable. I had heard about this, of course. It's one of the things that makes him notorious, kind of like having a 700 plus page FBI file, once being thought to be the Unabomber, and on, things like that. But, I had heard from interviews and things like that, references to the smuggling of the Thai child, but I had never read the piece, and it happens here. And boy, it's really something. You also get the story of him almost dying in Europe when he is there during all the tensions, of course, in the Bosnian War, the tensions between the Muslims and the Serbians and the Croatians, and then, of course, the battle over Kosovo. And he's there, and they make a wrong turn, and they trigger a mine that kills his two friends, but spares him somehow. And I had never read the extended story about that either. It is a pulse-pounding adventure, as only Vollmann could not only tell it, but do it. The coverage is just about the whole decade of the 1990s, and I ended up really thankful for reading this volume, as sort of not as even though it was hard to read and hard to face what all was really going on in the world during the 90s. I was born in 84, so I basically, grew up in the 90s. The 90s, that's my era that I look back on, and it seems so innocent and luminous, getting Happy Meals at McDonald's and renting video cassettes at Blockbuster and things like that, seeing Home Alone in the theater. The 90s for me is just this beautiful, glorious time, this paradise lost that I often cast my gaze back on. But Vollmann helped put it into perspective, what was really going on in the world. So we start off in Southeast Asia, and he's in Cambodia. And of course, William T. Vollmann, it has one goal in mind, and that is meeting with and interviewing none other than Pol Pot. Then we come to Cambodia in America, and Vollmann is running around with gangs, Cambodian and other ethnic gangs in California, prostitution in Thailand. This is when he saves the young girl, and then Burma and the Shan state, and he interviews and dialogues with this person they refer to as the Opium King, and then the Yakuza in Japan. And he interviews this high-profile Yakuza boss, and it's just incredible the things that the stunts or jaunts, as he calls them in this book, the jaunts that Vollmann has pulled off. Then we go to Europe, and like I said, we're in the Republic of Croatia and the Republic of Serbia and war over Kosovo. And this is where Vollmann is at his best. The American variety, meaning of politics, mostly bores me, but I can never get my fill of Balkan politics, where every tale's a twist-crammed cliffhanger whose plot begins and ends alike in mist, like the winter sky over Kosovo. History shading into sacred myth. And like I said, this is where he shines because he loves these super complicated conflicts with so many different variables. This is why he is doing the Seven Dreams heptology, because all these different conflicts are so complicated. It isn't just a matter of Europeans slaughtering natives. There's a lot more going on, even between the tribes of the natives before we even got here. The same with down in Mexico before Cortez showed up. And here he tries to unravel and lay out for us all the conflicts between Serbians, Croatians, Muslims, and then the U.S. getting in there. One person tells him that they think that the U.S. actually instigated the Civil War. And Vollmann humorously, but seriously, replies, usually when my country, meaning America, does evil things, we either help a dictator kill people or else we invade and kill people. I don't think we're subtle enough to start a civil war. But toward the end, that seed that person planted starts to sprout a little bit in his mind. We end the volume in Africa. He starts off in Madagascar, then in Brazzaville, in the Republic of Congo, and Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The poverty and political conflict and violence that stems from these things. Vollmann is so good about getting in there and not sitting in an ivory tower or a newsroom or in an armored news van and just having a liaison with top people. No, Vollmann goes to the jail cells. He almost gets stabbed several times. He's walking up and down the streets. He finds this woman named Madame Dracula who shows him her moves for killing people or mugging people, how to steal a purse properly. Humorously, but sort of like black humor, really sad on the other side of it. She and her son tell Vollmann that they'd be happy to go and kill somebody to show him how it's done, just totally nonchalantly. But Vollmann says, no thanks, I think the simulation is adequate. But he also shows how everybody is alike in that we have this spectrum of emotions, and different factors outside of our control can squeeze and narrow that spectrum to just a few emotions, such as the rampant jealousy that he digs out in his jaunts in Madagascar and the Congos. As I said, these are journalistic pieces, and he has commentary on, not wanting to be a journalist, on the dangers of what he's doing. And he also shows how many people around him are very mistrustful of the media. Rightfully so. It just shows, again, more traits of Vollmann's that most writers just don't have, most journalists don't even have. He realizes that to do this right, he's got to win people's trust, key figures, people who are, their default mode is not to trust people, for sure. But, people still challenge him and are very suspicious about what he's doing. And at one point he says, trying again, I explained that in America, everything and everyone was owned by corporations whose only politics was money. And Men's Journal, its owners, editors, advertisers, publishers, and readers didn't care much about politics, as long as I could squeeze in a little cheap sensationalism here and there. And that was footnoted, so I had to go and read the footnotes. His footnotes aren't like David Foster Wallace, but they can often be funny, and they have a personality all their own, as well as informative. Sometimes it's just, a reference to the bibliography. But in this case, at the footnote says, perhaps I should not have been surprised when Men's Journal rejected this essay. So that, don't skip the footnotes. At the start of the volume, he offers a challenge to moral relativists. He says, if you are a moral relativist, I urge you to study these murderers' examples and rethink your position. The Skulls on the Shelves, which is his essay on Pol Pot's Cambodia, proves that anybody who thinks and cares about the world bears an urgent necessity to construct a moral calculus. Later, he says, who defines homeland? What equilibrium would you propose between authority and liberty? What are the rights of a sovereign state? And what if they conflict with the rights of an ethnic minority? And I couldn't help but think about the current conflict between Israel and Palestine. It hit me again when he mentioned the death of his sister, which is something that haunts him. It's all in his interviews. There's a striking little segment about it in the Atlas. He says, when even the kindest, best-minded people presume to open the subject of my sister's death, I feel resentment and pain whether I express them or not. This is a topic which, so I want to say, only I have a right to raise. Only I was there, you were not. I continue on with my sadness. And it struck me that carrying this around within him is one major factor that allows Vollmann to be so empathetic with these people among whom he's living and observing and learning. And then, of course, there's that literary side of Vollmann that you get to see a lot in the journalism, such as when he says that the room smelled like screams. What a just effective use of synesthesia that is. He mentions that he was reading Dostoevsky's The Idiot at the time, and he's in a hotel room in Cambodia, I think. And you've just been reading about all these crazy things he's doing and trying to play the game to discover child prostitution rings. And yet you get this image of Vollmann at night, exhausted after all these things and risking his life, and he's in a hotel room reading The Idiot. That kind of stuff. I love those kinds of things. He thanks the publisher openly, Mr. Dave Eggers, who's the one who took the chance with McSweeney's on publishing these volumes. And he says that Dave Eggers is, in fact, a very big-hearted, generous, empathetic man. A lot of people are telling him when he's in Japan, when he's in Tokyo, interviewing Mr. Suzuki, I think his name was, the big Yakuza boss, and people are reacting to him and saying he's a big deal. He checks with Pynchon's translator, Pynchon's Japanese translator, and Mr. Yoshiaki Sato assured him that he had never heard of this Yakuza boss. It's just interesting to think, that he's got access to Pynchon's editor. And then, of course, I'm just learning new things constantly as I read Vollmann. Some things I feel like I should know, such as the Humanity Declaration that happened on January 1st, 1946, where the United Nations forced Japan's emperor to renounce his deification or his divinity and admit that he's just a man and not a god, and on and on and on. It's just, these books have been so educational in so many ways. So that's it for Volume 5. Next up is the final volume, Volume 6, and we're moving into the Muslim world and North America, and then it looks like there's a section that'll wrap things up. So we're going to continue on with more journalism in other parts of the world. As always, thank you for watching.